I'm a forest ecologist, and I've worked in redwood forest since I came here in 1997. Dave asked me to come and provide a biologist's point of view, and I have to say, I'm going to do that. But I'm not just a biologist, I'm also a member of the community and a co-op member. So I'm going to probably provide perspectives from all three of those hats. As a biologist, both Kim and Kerul, is that right, mentioned Save the Redwoods League, and I've known Ruskin Hartley for years and worked with him on a number of projects, and I agree with Save the Redwood League's assessment that from an ecological perspective, the proposed project, as it's proposed, will have only minor ecological damage. And I say that, and I want to make it clear that I'm saying that there will be minor ecological damage and zero ecological benefit. Okay, so there is no benefit. But from a biological perspective, the damage is rather minor. The number of trees that will be impacted are probably, well within normal mortality for trees and forests like that. And certainly, many of those trees, by benefit of where they already are, have somewhat limited ecological services that they provide to that forest. They're all impacted by edge effects and by desiccation, and by the road being there to begin with. So from a biological perspective, I would expect the impacts to be minor. But they are real. There will be negative impacts. There won't be any positive impacts. And then, as a member of the community, I have to ask myself, do the proposed benefits justify those minor negative impacts? And I'm not sure they do. I really don't. I'm really not sure that they do. Most of the arguments that I've heard in favor of this project have been economic. And quite frankly, my response to that, I keep coming back to the idea that, we don't have to be homogeneous. We don't all have to be like Santa Rosa or, the Bay Area. There may be some economic advantages, or disadvantages, I should say, to living in Humboldt County or to running a business in Humboldt County. That's all right with me. I'm perfectly fine with that, and I kind of like it that way, personally. I don't see the proposed benefits as being worth even minor ecological impacts, frankly. And I want to also make it clear that I'm talking about assured ecological impacts. The impacts as proposed in the project proposal, as I said, are minor, and I agree with Ruskin's perspective on this. But those are the assured ecological impacts. There may, in fact, be considerable downstream impacts that we can't predict. And certainly, if one of the outcomes of the realignment of 101 and allowing larger trucks to come through and that sort of thing, if one of those impacts is increased urbanization, if it becomes easier to move goods and people and commerce into and out of Humboldt County, that has positive economic impact, but it won't have positive environmental impact. It simply won't. And those outcomes are less assured. We don't know what they'll be, but we know the general direction they're likely to move in, and it's a trajectory that I'm not happy with. So again, and I want to make sure there's lots of time for comments, so I'm going to questions, so I'm going to stop here in just a second. But I want to make it clear that my assessment, my personal, my professional opinion about this is that the ecological and biological impacts, direct assured impacts, are not significantly negative, but they are negative. There are no positive impacts, and I'm concerned about future increased negative impacts. And I'll quit there. Thank you.
Are there any questions for Dr. Camann? Oh, right.
Yes.
Oh, I just want to thank the speakers about the environmental issues, and just wanted to say that even though the negative impacts would be minor, I remember when the big storm came through Sequoia Park, all of the damage was along the road. I think about 125 big trees fell down. So that when you already have a road and it's been there for like 100 years or something, and damage isn't too bad, now we're pushing back a little bit. And even if some of those trees that are going out are minor, and the loss of them is minor, that they have a protective function. And why don't you make it the more, you know, it's just like, take it. And so that, I think, might be one of the things you're talking about, but there could be other impacts that we don't know.
Another question?
I think.
Do we have one more?
Yeah.
So can you explain, I mean, as I've looked at the Caltrans plan, I'm happy they're not cutting so many trees, but I'm astounded at the number of roots the number of trees. So will you tell us a little bit about?
Yeah. One of the issues, the main issue here from a biological perspective is that redwoods, you know, when trees, especially old growth redwoods, when they get that tall, there's a tremendous amount of tension that's generated in the water conducting tracheids and, you know, parts of the tree. And during summer in particular, that becomes really, you know, a physiological stress for those trees. And if they cavitate, if the water column breaks, then that can result in crown dieback and loss of, you know, needle loss and loss of branches and that sort of thing. There are two issues involved here with the root disturbance. Soil compaction and just general disturbance of the roots, cutting the roots, that sort of thing, decreases the uptake capacity for those trees. So it exacerbates the stress from the bottom up. And the presence of the road likely, and again, this is, you know, there's no data to really support this, but it really seems that this is what's happening, because you can see areas along 101 where there's considerable crown dieback. The road itself interferes to some extent with the one process during the summer that sort of ameliorates all this, which is fog accumulation. So the fog up in the canopy tends to reduce the pull from the top end on that water column. And so the trees that are along roads tend to be, you know, in a higher stress environment to begin with. Now, I agree with the statements that Kim made earlier, that the measures that they're taking to ameliorate the root damage are good things to do. But there will be root damage, you know, and there will be an increase in tree stress along the road. There's no question. But there's already considerable stress on those trees. So again, I don't think that you know, from a biological perspective, I don't think that the increase in stress on some trees is going to be catastrophic. But they're already existing, you know, in many cases near the edge of their physiological tolerance, especially the old growth trees that are really tall along edges.
And just as a follow-up, am I right? I'm not a biologist. And that the ratio of height to depth of roots in redwoods is really small, so when they fall over, we see the roots.
Yeah, the roots are shallow. The roots are very shallow, and one of the reasons for that is that there's lots of water near the surface on the North Coast generally. It's a wet environment, and the nutrients are largely spread out along the surface in these very shallow, you know, sandy soils. Yes, and I don't know what my time's
This will
like.
be our last question, and then we'll move into the other.
That is part of what I'm concerned about, is that the redwoods have this widespread shallow root system.
But it's widely distributed, so it's important to remember
Well,
that.
but what Kim talked about was that they wouldn't be going over 2 feet down into the roots, and I'm going, wait a minute, that's how far the roots go.
Well, a major part of the root mass is in that top 2 feet.
Most of it is in that top
Yep.
couple of feet. So it isn't comforting to me to hear they're only going 2 feet down, you know? Oh, and one other piece, the permeable cement that they are going to do as an overlay, as an alternative to a hot mix. I'm very concerned about that. Cement, limestone, redwoods.
Well, that's another issue, and I'm not an engineer, so I don't know how much leaching they expect out of that base material.
Lots of these.